Got a super easy but amazingly delicious recipe that I worked up just kind of spur of the moment. So this recipe begins with olive oil. Use extra virgin olive oil, but you don't need an expensive olive oil. If that's what you want to use, that's fine. But we're going to wind up flavoring the olive oil with garlic later on in the recipe, so it really doesn't matter what kind of olive oil you use. The cheese is pretty important though. Use Parmigiano Reggiano if you can find it, because that's authentic stuff that comes from Italy and it has lots of flavor, which you will be using here. You need jarred artichoke hearts. This and your garlic are going to be the two main flavorings in this dish. This is a 24 ounce. Generally the jars come in two sizes, 24 and, well, I didn't even look with the other size, but this is the large jar, 24 ounces of artichoke hearts. You're going to need some lemon. We're going to use a little zest and some of the juice of the lemon, obviously salt, pepper, cayenne pepper. If you have cayenne pepper, which I imagine you do, you can use that. I like the Sriracha Tabasco brand is what I normally buy, but it doesn't really matter. Either one of these is good, and you're not using much of this. This is not about making it spicy. This is about giving depth to the flavor. So don't worry if you don't like spicy food. This isn't going to be spicy. We're going to put a tiny bit in, and adding that spice in the background adds depth to the flavor of the dish. All right, let me clear off my workspace here, and we'll get started. Okay, first we're going to drain the artichoke hearts. I would normally do this over the sink, but this is easier because this is my workspace here. So you don't need a bowl. You can do this in your sink. I'm using a strainer. You could use your colander, as I said, in the sink. We're going to pour them in and just let them drain for a moment. We don't need to wash them or do anything else with them. Just drain them in the strainer and that'll be perfect. I turned on the broiler about 5 minutes ago, so it's time to get them ready for roasting. So just take a small roasting pan like this, a sheet pan. I covered it with foil just to make it easier for cleanup for me later. And I normally do some sort of oil coating on the bottom of this roasting pan so that they don't stick during the process of being in the oven. All right, so now we take the drained artichoke hearts and we move them over, just dump them unceremoniously in the middle of the pan. We get rid of this stuff to make a little more room for ourselves and so that I don't actually knock it over later. And then just turn them over. It really doesn't matter what side is up or what side is down. I try to normally do as much as I can the cut sides up, but they're going to be great no matter what. The nice thing about this process is that they're fairly wet, and so normally you put something under the broiler in your oven and it is liable to burn very quickly. These are pretty forgiving. They're going to stay in there longer than you expect them to stay in there. So don't worry about them too much. Check on them. They're going to be great. They're going to come up nice, lightly roasted. What you don't want is a lot of blackening. You just want some color. Again, under the broiler, and we'll check on them in a couple of minutes, but we move on to the rest of the recipe now. All right, it's time to prep the garlic. You need a small saucepan. This is the smallest one I have. I'm not going to make you watch me prep the garlic. I've got some pre-prepped here because watching somebody prep garlic is, well, like watching somebody juggle angry cats. You don't need to see that. So this is what I started with. I've got a whole head of garlic here, or roughly about 10 decent-sized, large-sized cloves. And now the last bit, and even this is going to be a messy process, but I just crush them to take the paper skins off, and then we're going to get them into the pan. All right, trigger alert for those of you who are the type of people who like exact measurements when you're working on something in a recipe. I'm not going to give you an exact measurement. This really depends on the size of your pan. So you're going to put in the amount of olive oil that roughly almost covers all of your garlic. It doesn't mean everything has to be submerged, but the majority of it is under the oil. Time to move it to the stovetop. You want your burner on as low as it will go. And mine really won't go very low because it's gas. So this is as low as the flame can get on mine. So I use one of these diffusers, sorry about the camera work, that just helps keep the heat low as I'm simmering the garlic. And then I put the garlic on, and again, it is on super low. It's going to take a while. This is 20 minutes or so in this process that you're going to be cooking this. And once that comes to a simmer, then I kind of turn it down even more, but this level of simmering is perfect. And then what I do is I move over to take a look and check on the artichoke hearts. And at this point, they look perfectly done. They have just about this level of blackening. So some black spots are fine. You don't want to get to the point where they are reduced to ash or that they have become dehydrated in the oven. But this looks perfect. All right, so back to the cutting board. We're going to quickly put down a towel so that I don't wind up burning the cutting board that I got for Christmas. And now it's time to put the artichokes down, and we'll get a chance to see again exactly how roasted they are. So those come over from the oven, just lightly roasted. Maybe I could have gone a little longer with them, and I certainly could have turned them over if I wanted to. I don't want to, as I said, begin to dehydrate them. So if they start getting visibly smaller and smaller, it's time to take them out, because you want the mass, you want that to make the majority of the dip. Just so you can get a little bit better sense of the level of doneness on these, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can look at them closer and see how roasted they are and what yours should look like when you're done. And in hindsight, as I look at these, I think they could use a little more roasting than I actually gave them. I was overeager and wanted to get on with the rest of the recipe, so I think I jumped the gun just a little bit, and I'd give them a little more time than this. So now that I've let these cool for a couple of minutes, I can safely put them on the cutting board, and I'm going to pull out a bowl again that will allow me to just set them to the side for a moment until I need them. All right, so I'm going to use a food processor for this. I am fortunate enough to have one of these tiny little food processors that I love, but are horribly made and they fall apart rather quickly, so that is rather disappointing. But you could use a full-size food processor. You could use this. If you have a blender, one of those inverted blenders like a bullet blender, I think that would work well. The problem with a full-size blender is that you're going to wind up with a lot of the dip stuck at the bottom, and it's going to be difficult to get to and get out after you've made the dip. All right, so we've assembled our lemon and our cheese, which we are going to be grating with our microplane grater. And if you don't own a microplane grater, these things are 15 to 20 bucks, and they are worth their weight in gold. So I am going to grate some of the cheese, which immediately broke on me, which that will be enough so I can set the rest aside. I am going to grate probably 2 times as much I'm initially going to put in, maybe 3 times as much. I always grate too much for a couple of reasons. One is it makes a great garnish afterwards, and it's kind of fun to snack on while you're cooking. So roughly 2 to 3 tablespoons of grated cheese is going to be plenty. If you want this cheesier, you can do more. If you want it a little less, you can do less. Don't go way more than that, because it's very salty cheese, and so it will overly salt the dish. Quickly grind a little fresh pepper, probably a teaspoon's worth, but whatever you like. All right, so this clip that I'm showing you is time-lapse, so know that you're watching probably 10 minutes of video right here in 15 seconds. I'm wanting you to see how very, very, very slowly it takes on color. Every once in a while I'll go in and switch it around or turn them over, but you're wanting it to take on a golden brown. Nothing dark, no dark brown at all. And then what you're going to do ultimately is you'll know it's done when you can take a tong and they crush easily. And then ultimately this kind of golden amber color is exactly what you're looking for, and these are ready. Back to the cutting board, where I've got a bowl and my strainer ready to drain the garlic, and then I remember at the last minute that I need to put a protection under there so that I don't burn the board. And then I'm just going to pour the garlic in there, separating it from the oil. We're going to keep both. Both are being used. So we're keeping the oil and we're keeping the garlic. We're just going to use them at separate times in the recipe. All right, you see me here get ready to start blending, and then remember, oh yeah, I had a hard time with the blending last time, so nope, time to put the blender away or to rip the food processor away, and time to do a rough chop of the artichoke hearts. This just saves a lot of time in the food processor, because these are big enough, particularly in this food processor, that it has a hard time pulling them down. And last time I must have spent 10 minutes with the food processor trying to get them smooth. So this is just saving me a lot of time when they go into the food processor. A rough chop, there is no method here, just chopping them up into smaller pieces so it can mince them up rather easily. Now it's time to get them onto my bench scraper, get my food processor here so I won't make a mess and drop them all over the place, and neatly transfer them from one location into the other. At which I totally failed. They went everywhere and I had to wind up cleaning them off the counter. Now the artichoke hearts are in. I'm going to add just a pinch of salt. I'm going to add my pepper. I am going to now move over and grab my garlic, and I'm just going to put all that garlic in there. At this point, I'm getting really hungry. The kitchen smells so good. Now, I'm going to take just a little of the oil. The idea of adding oil at this point is not really for flavor or anything other than it allows the process to be a little smoother. It allows the food processor to make shorter work. I'm going to add some cheese, and now I'm going to do a little lemon zest in there. So turn it upside down. I find this the easiest way because you can see how much zest you're getting in your microplane. And I take, a couple of turns of the lemon so that I don't get any pith. I get my lemon zest, and then when I've got probably about a teaspoon, I put it in there and also throw some on the counter just for good measure. So in previous versions of this, I did not add the lemon, and it dawned on me later on that I thought, it would probably brighten it up if I add a little lemon. So you can see just kind of one wedge of lemon and some lemon zest is all I'm adding, and I'll tell you at the end whether or not it makes a difference. Okay, now let me talk a little bit about what I learned in terms of processing this. The first time I did this, I really wanted it to have kind of the consistency of a tapenade. So where you could see the various chunks of stuff in there, I wanted it to still have some texture. So the first time I did it, I underprocessed it. And one of the things I discovered very quickly is that the artichoke hearts, if they are underprocessed, are going to be very fibrous. Now you'll see here that I'm adding some more oil because it's not processing as quickly as I like. It needs a little more liquid. What I don't want is a soupy texture to this, and that's why I'm adding oil little by little by little. I want it to be the right texture to put on a cracker. So now I'm beginning to process it, but do not worry about over-processing this. It will still have plenty of texture. It will not come out like baby food, but you do not want to under-process it, or those artichoke hearts wind up being kind of fibrous and feeling like you put pieces of rope in there. All right, so those of you who are anxious about things being too spicy, I'm going to use the cayenne pepper here, and I'm going to zoom in at the end and give you a good sense of it is very, very little that I put in there. And it does not wind up being spicy in the least. So that's how much cayenne pepper I put in, but it does make a difference in terms of the flavoring. All right, so now some more processing, and I think it still needs a little more oil, so we're going to put, again, a little more oil to see if we can get more of the texture we're looking for here. And a little more processing to get it smoother one more time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open the food processor up, and we're going to take out some sort of spatula or spoon or anything you want to use just to make sure that any larger bits that are still stuck on the side go down in and get processed, because again, it doesn't work very well if they're large chunks. You want this fairly smooth, and you don't want those kind of more fibrous pieces left behind. Because so many of the ingredients we're putting into the food processor are warm, it's steaming up the top of the lid, which I'm kind of disappointed in. But you can see that it's beginning to get much smoother now. It's beginning to move around the food processor more easily, and we are just about there. I forgot to record it, but I do a quick tasting off camera, and it's good. It doesn't need anything. So I am good to go at this point and ready to plate. So let's clean up. And if you've made it to this point, you have everything you need to do the final plating. It drives me crazy on a recipe when somebody says, now that we're doing the final plating, you need Spanish pickled pimentos. And I'm like, you should have said that up front. You've got everything. You don't need anything else at this point. Time to bring over the food processor bowl and do the most difficult part of the recipe, which is transferring it neatly. I'm not going to show you the process. Transferring it neatly into the bowl without making a mess. Now, I have transferred the remaining oil into this little glass pitcher just because it's easier to pour it exactly where I want it to go. And at this point, I smooth it out. just to make it look nice. But there's a purpose to this as well, which is as I'm smoothing it out, I am in the end also going to add a little bit of an indentation in the middle, because I am going to garnish it with two things. I'm going to garnish it with some of the remaining oil. So I'm going to take the oil right now and pour it over, just drizzle it over, and that flavored oil is just fantastic. And then the last thing I'm going to garnish with, I normally garnish with cheese and we're done, but at this point I decided, well, maybe a little more lemon juice would be great on top. So I'm going to take one little wedge of lemon. I'm going to squeeze that on top and see how that goes, since we've already put some lemon in there. And now I take just a little bit of the cheese left over and I garnish with the cheese on top. And you can do as much or as little in any way you want on top, whatever makes you happy. Now, as I tidy up just a little bit on my cutting board and go get something to eat this with, I'll give you the obligatory slow zoom in on the dip to let you see what it looks like up close. And it looks pretty good, and it tastes even better. Okay, now it's time with the crackers. I'm a big fan of these, and so if you see them in the store, they are great. They're little toast points, and they are perfect for this kind of dip. They have lots of crunch to them, a little substance to them. They don't fall apart when you try to spread the dip on it. And now is the best part of the entire process, because after all of this, I'm getting to finally taste it. Grab myself a butter knife so I can spread it easily, get some of this, make sure I get some of the oil and the cheese, and now we get to see the final results. What does it taste like? Okay, that is really good. And the lemon really did make a difference. It's not lemony, but it adds a certain brightness to it that really elevates the dish even further. So I would definitely do that again. I had not had lunch at this point, and it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so if I just left the camera rolling, you would watch me eat about 15 of these, one after another. But it was delicious. I hope you try this recipe and enjoy it, because it's really good. And once you've assembled the stuff, once you have got all the stuff together, that's the most difficult part. And then it's easy and delicious. Oh, I almost forgot. If you have any oil left over, don't throw it away. This stuff's liquid gold. It's delicious. You can use it for all sorts of things like dipping crusty bread in. All done. Thanks for watching. I hope you try this, and I really hope you enjoy it.